Hey, it's Eric Scott, and it's time for another Mixed Media Monday. And as always, I'm just sitting down, making a little piece of artwork, and I hope that you can follow along. And remember, you don't have to do exactly what I'm doing. I never look for people to make copies of what I do. Just showing you some techniques and some ideas, and sharing some process with you. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive into what we're going to make today. So I've got my little 4x4 inch mixed media paper. I just love this size because it's a great size to experiment with. I don't get so attached to it. And of course, it's quick. I can get it done pretty quickly. I've got some of my paints, got some scissors, and today I've got something a little bit different. I was going through my fodder and I found these little coin envelopes, and I bought these a long time ago, but unfortunately, because of the humidity that we have here in Virginia, they've kind of sealed themselves, so they don't work so well as little envelopes anymore. But I like the color, and just going to use that as the to glue stuff down, to use it as the fodder. So I think I'll start with that, just like I did last time with the security envelopes. I'm going to use this as the beginnings of my work today. And these are really nice because they're just a nice small size, and I don't really care about the archival quality. I know some folks are really bothered by that. I think that was been a comment on the book that I wrote with my friend David about the Journal Junkies workshop, that some folks were like, oh, but you don't worry about it being acid free and all this stuff. No, I don't. This is for me. And if it ends up in a museum one day, then it'll be up to the conservators to kind of figure that part out. But anyway, so I think I'm just going to start with some of this and just kind of lay out a rough little composition. Maybe that would come up there like that. So one of the things is, I've been sharing just a lot of basic techniques that I use, some really simple techniques that I use again and again. And I always feel like, I have this arsenal of techniques. I have this stockpile of materials and techniques that I use. And I have, of course, my favorites. And, I use a lot of collage, and I use a lot of paint. But I end up using them over and over again, but kind of using them maybe in different ways, or with different ideas. Sometimes I change up the order as I work. So sometimes I'll start off with the paint, and sometimes I'll start off with collage, sometimes I'll start off with drawing. But one of the things that I kind of want to get into, now that I've been doing this for a while, is that idea of ideas, of making work that's not just about the techniques. Because I feel like a lot of times we can get so caught up in the technical side of the art making. Like, we want to know, what can we do with these materials, and how do we use these certain things, and what are the techniques, and that we can sort of forget about the other part of the art. And I feel that, art, we want to communicate something. We want people to see it, and we want people to gain something from it. And I think that's a part that gets left out a lot in some of the things that I see online, or in some books, or even in workshops, that a lot of times it's just about the materials, it's about the technique, and not about the content. And so last week I had done the crack image, and I'd mentioned that came from the idea of emergence. And that is something that's been on my mind for a long time now. And I just didn't come to that one day. It just, it didn't pop in my mind. And it was like, oh, I'm going to make work about emergence. It really came about just from kind of doing what I'm doing, experimenting, trying things out. Because what I find is that as an artist, I like to play and I like to experiment. And usually what happens is I start to do something and I'm like, oh, I really like this idea, but I don't know what it means, or I like a certain image, or I like the way a certain combination of materials has come together, and I have to kind of figure that out. Why am I doing those things? So anyway, I got this collage down. Let me go ahead and I want to hit this with the hair dryer because like I mentioned last week, is that sometimes the glue isn't totally dry. And so when I paint over it, it can peel off. If I make sure it's dry, it's less likely to peel off. Okay. So, yeah, so really for me, the ideas, the content, the meaning, the purpose behind the art comes from doing things like this. And this is one of the reasons I love the small size, is that I can experiment, I can try a lot of different things and kind of figure out like, well, what is it about this thing that I really am interested in? Why do I keep coming back to certain ideas and certain notions? Uh, so I talked about, I don't know if it was last week or some other time, but I talked about how for me, building up layers really is kind of like building up time. It's like layers of memories. And I feel like for me, that's a reason why I do this. This is the reason why I work with layers, is that I like that notion that it's kind of like building up time or building up a history. Um, yeah, so that's one of the things that I kind of think about as I am working on these. And so thinking about how like the collage here could be about structure, maybe structure that's imposed on us that maybe necessarily we didn't necessarily agree to. So that you think about the rules and the things that your parents impose on you when you're a kid, to keep you safe. And then, as you grow, you kind of feel like maybe some of those rules and regulations and things really are an imposition, and that we have to grow and change. We have our life experiences, and that all kind of piles on top. And that's kind of what I think about as I'm making and as I'm layering up the materials. Let me go ahead and hit this with the hair dryer. And so just kind of thinking about that idea of like, why do you make the art that you make? Why are you drawn to certain colors? Why are you drawn to certain images or certain shapes? And that's kind of where the discovery comes in, is that, I want, at least in my own art, I want to discover things. And so, I might be working in my journal a lot, or I might be working on small papers. And I just sort of, even if I don't know, so sometimes we don't know why we do a certain thing, why we like a certain colors, but we use them over and over again. And I think that's a perfect time to really reflect on why. And what are we trying to communicate? Because ultimately, like I said, that we make art because we're trying to communicate something. But I think as beginning artists, we often just get kind of caught up in that, the technical side of how do you do things, how do you use materials. Um, but I think that that notion of discovering and figuring out what it is that you want to say, and why do you make the art that you make. I think that's an important thing. That's a little bit too big of a thing for these short little half-hour, 40-minute sessions, but I just kind of want to talk about it. That's the nice thing, is that I can kind of talk about my thought process as I'm making this, and like, what am I trying to say? And sometimes I do make stuff, I'm like, I don't know what I'm trying to say with this piece, or what I'm trying to say comes out as I make the piece. But I think with this one, I really have been thinking about this notion of emergence. It's been on my mind a lot, and just kind of feel like, we have these experiences that shape our lives. Some of the experiences are sort of forced on us, or we don't choose them, but they're part of our life. They're part of our lives, and we have to figure out their impact, and they do impact us in different ways, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. But then this idea of emergence is that we eventually have to like emerge, and who we are kind of, yeah, it's influenced by these things, but we sort of have to, I don't know, break free from that. Let me go ahead and hit this with the hair dryer. Okay. So as I was digging through my fodder collection, looking, for something, I found these little envelopes. I also found a sheet of brains, and these have been printed on a laser printer, and so I'm going to use them. I'm going to do an image transfer. I don't know if I've done this transfer yet in this series, but I'm going to use a solvent. So the solvent is, it's a chemical that's going to basically melt the toner. It melts plastic. The toner is kind of plastic-like. It's a little bit shiny. So this works with a laser printed image or with a photocopy. And so I'm going to put that on. It's a nice size. And I'm going to transfer it so that the toner gets transferred. And I'm going to use something that has a chemical in it. This is a Chartpak add marker, blender marker. So it's a clear, colorless blender. And I actually have a few of them, because what I find is that the ones I have are kind of running low, and so sometimes they'll have enough to get started, and then I have to switch the marker. They do run out very quickly, and they can be kind of expensive. So this also works with a chemical called goof off. The solvent in it is xylene, which is, it's a fairly nasty chemical, and you really want to use this in a well ventilated area. But what I'm doing is just applying the clear marker to the back of the image, and I'm going to hold the image very still. See, it's starting to dry out. So let me go ahead and switch markers. And so what happens is that that xylene soaks through to the other side, and it starts to soften the toner. And so a lot of times, even as I'm just coloring on the marker, the toner will start to transfer. So I really want to get it saturated. And you can see how it really soaked through. And if I pick it up, You can see how it started to transfer, but I'm going to use a wooden spoon. And I want it to transfer a little bit better, so I'll rub it, I'll burnish it. And this stuff is kind of stinky, and so if you are sensitive to chemicals, this is definitely something I would skip. It's got to be a nice high contrast black and white image. It can work with color images as well, and so it's not too bad. It's a little bit broken up because of the collage, but that's kind of cool. And it's not a perfect transfer, so it looks a little bit more grainy. I can save this, let it dry completely, and I can do a tape transfer. I can use packing tape and transfer it. But anyway, I'll put that off to the side, let that air out, put these markers back. The nice thing about this transfer is that I can do stuff on top of it. And so as long as it's nice and dry, I'm going to hit it up with the hair dryer just to make sure that it's dry. All right. So that chemical does affect the paper a little bit. And so sometimes I'll see that the paint will soak in a little bit differently. But I have this idea of emergence in mind, but I don't, sometimes I just sort of let the image go where it wants to. So I don't know exactly what I want to say about emergence. And, kind of thinking like, okay, the brain, I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see where this goes. So I'm just taking some of this fuchsia color, one of my favorite colors to use, and just kind of painting. Sometimes I do this with ink. Sometimes I'll do it with the water-soluble pencil, but just going to use the paint just to kind of make it subtle. So I often find that just kind of keeping that topic, that idea of emergence or whatever it is that I'm working on, just kind of keeping that in mind is a way to just let the idea kind of slowly percolate. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of red. I don't know, I just feel like more spiders. Just I was looking for little plastic spatulas that I have lying around. These are good for different things, but I like to use them as a little scraper. So a scraper or a putty knife. Sometimes people have old gift cards and they just kind of use it to scrape, just to kind of scrape the little splatters that I had made. Yeah, I'm just kind of like, I'm not even sure what I'm going to do. Let me go ahead and dry this. Hmm. To be honest, I'm kind of just feeling at a loss, like, oh, what am I going to do next? So maybe this is a time to just kind of grab something random, just grab a black pen. Um, actually, let me go back. Let me grab this. Maybe I want to bring in some ink. So even though I'm thinking of this idea of emergence, I'm not thinking about doing another crack image. I could. Um, I'm really kind of thinking about that notion of how our experiences build up over time, and how we're sort of this combination of experiences and things that have happened to us, and uh, even just thinking about how the family that we grow up in affects us in ways that we don't always comprehend, and that those experiences, the family, like even before we're born, and their experiences help mold and shape us for better or for worse. And so we're this buildup of things, and then we have to sort of, we take all this in, we learn, we grow, we change, and then it's sort of like, okay, I've been influenced by all these things, but who am I going to choose to be? What am I going to choose to do? So a lot of stuff building up now, kind of a bit chaotic, but we'll see. And like I mentioned last time, if you tuned in, sometimes you do stuff and you're just like, yeah, that did not work, or it's not exactly what you had hoped for. That's why I like this little size, because if it's not exactly what you wanted, then you haven't spent a whole lot of time or materials or effort. I just find that I'm less attached to these little experiments because they are small and they don't take a lot of time. And so I use these as ways to kind of figure things out. Yeah, it's getting kind of really muddied up, not muddied up, but just really busy. So I need to figure out a way to bring some focus in it, to bring more contrast. That's the thing. It's like there's not a lot of contrast now. The brain is starting to kind of disappear. Things are kind of getting dark. And let me go ahead and try it. So I'm gonna bring in some contrast using the pen, and I've got a list of words. So I thought about the word emerge, and then I kind of started thinking about just kind of brainstorming another list. So I'm kind of thinking like maybe I can use something from here. Just kind of thinking about this. So yeah, I sat down before I started today and just kind of took a couple minutes and just kind of brainstormed. I kind of like this idea of breaking out, breaking free, coming forth, bringing forth. I don't know. I think break. Um, We'll see. So I have it going over this collage, which kind of adds a little bit of a layer of complications, but I just want to make sure, take my time, and I can really make that word just kind of go over top. Because that envelope, it's a fairly thick material. So one of the things that I try to do as I'm working is I try not to judge it, to like criticize myself, like, oh, this isn't working, oh, this piece sucks. I try not to have any of that kind of self-talk, that inner critic that pops up. I can i can evaluate it. I can stop for a minute, like I did there a few moments ago whenever I said, it's losing its contrast. I didn't say, oh, this sucks, I better stop and throw it away. But we do that sometimes. We have this inner critic, and it can really stop us from moving forward. And just that right there starts to bring a lot of contrast to the piece. There's often writers often talk about how you can't write and edit at the same time. It's the same thing with like making art. It's like you have to work for a while, then stop, and then evaluate, kind of see like what's working, what's not working, try some things, but you have to kind of suppress that inner critic. And sometimes the critic isn't so much about evaluating, it's about shutting you down. It's about telling you how bad you are at stuff, or that that I often hear the term imposter syndrome. It's like, who are you kidding, you're not an artist. And again, I think that's the inner critic. That's just our self-doubt coming up, and we're trying to self-sabotage. So but instead of doing that, what I'm trying to do is, okay, let me stop now. Okay, I did the word break free, now I'm stopping. Now I'm going to evaluate. I'm not criticizing, I'm evaluating. I think, I want a little bit more contrast. I want that word free to really pop out, but it pops out much, much more now. So I turned to my white gel pen, and then basically, because I don't have the contrast, I can bring it back and use that white. The only issue with the gel pens is sometimes they clog up pretty quickly, or they dry up, or they dry out a little bit. The tips get clogged. So you can see how that white really makes the words pop out. I think sometimes when we're starting out with making art, that, or even if we've been doing it for a while, I guess, we can often feel like, oh, every piece I make has to be a masterpiece. And that's why I like the little pieces, because it's like, yeah, maybe I'll do something I really like, but if I can give myself the freedom just to try and experiment and do things that maybe I normally wouldn't, I can I can break out of old habits. I can break free from old habits and find new ways and find new ideas. So as I'm talking about that and thinking about what I've been doing, all of a sudden I start to have a clearer idea of what this might be. And a lot of times it's the juxtaposition of words and images. And so that idea of a brain, thinking about, the brain, the mind, and breaking free, sometimes breaking free of our own mind, breaking out of the things that we typically think about or we typically do. And so that helps bring more thought into it, brings some idea to it. And I think it just really helps lift the artwork up, because it's not just about, oh, check out these cool layers and check out what I can do with the materials, but it becomes more about, yeah, it is about the materials, but then it's also about, here's this message, this idea, this story, this thing, that I want to try to communicate. It has a purpose. And sometimes that purpose comes as we work, and sometimes we have that idea as we begin. So I had that very vague notion of emergence as I started working, but now that I've been working and I have the brain and I have the break free, I have a clear idea, a more specific idea than just emergence. So it's kind of this notion of breaking free from our old ways of thinking. Maybe that's a good way of saying it. So I'm just kind of bringing in a little bit more contrast. Just trying to repeat some of these thick lines. Don't want to use any more words, but just having some of these thick lines. If I wanted to, I could outline them with the white, but I think what I'm going to do to help balance this, because right now all the focus, the weight is on this side. So thinking about emphasis, like, okay, break free, that really stands out. I want that to stand out. But then the visual weight's over here. So I want to have something over here to help balance it. So if I take, maybe make some black dots. But just black isn't going to do it. I need that contrast. So if I take the white, oops. So I still want this to be kind of the part that's emphasized, but this might help to balance it out. And I think maybe do a couple up here. Okay. It helps a little bit. So anyway, I think I'm going to call this done. I'll go ahead and sign it. And there we go. All right, so I hope you enjoyed another episode of Mixed Media Monday. And if you've been working along, or if you've been kind of doing your own art, great, awesome. If you just been watching, that's great too. I know a lot of times I like to watch these things, and then it kind of have this uh, this bank of ideas that's in my head when I go and sit down to make some things. So, but if you have any thoughts, any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. If you have ideas for possible things that you want to see me do, or things that you want to see me tackle, or things you want me to talk about as I work, feel free. But hopefully, it's hopefully you can start to build in ideas and themes, and kind of thinking about how you can make your art about something more than just the materials, just the techniques, just the layers of things. I think that just adds a little bit more. And if you don't feel super comfortable right now, just keep doing it. And the more you do it, the more you figure things out, the more you discover, and you'll soon kind of figure out like, oh, this is what I'm trying to say. This is what I'm getting at. This is why I do these things. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm glad I can bring this to you every week. And yeah, please, follow me on, or check me out on social media, check me out online. And yeah, thanks so much again. And as always, happy creating.